Okay, good morning everybody and welcome back to MakerBot Chats. As always, it's a pleasure to have you guys here. My name is Felipe, Creative Director at MakerBot, and today we have an interesting one. It's going to be about Sketch, our EDU platform. We call it EDU. I would say there's many, many really interesting applications beyond the classroom for this printer. I've been enjoying it quite a lot. I have a nice setup here with my Method X currently printing and my Sketch. And you know, it's a single, let's just start by that, describing what it is, right? It's a single extruder printer. That means that it will print in just one material. We are offering both PLA and TUF at the moment. And it seems a little bit deceiving, right? When you compare it like side by side to the Method. Method has 24 plus materials, Sketch has 2. However, the possibilities with it, I think, are really interesting because you can get a lot done with it. You know, I just ran a quick bearing test last week to see, you know, kind of the tolerances. The amount of parts that you can get from the build plate is also really interesting. So this is the build plate. And I'm going to be taking you guys through sort of the first process of printing your first part on Sketch. So describing, as I was saying, the printer overall, it's a single extrusion printer. It has a side mount for your filament. The filament basically goes in there. I'll be loading it in a second. These are the actual spools, quite large, you know, our MakerBot spools for Sketch, and they will last you a long time. And then inside of the printer, I have also my other camera view, but for now I'll just share this view. So inside of the printer we have the heated build plate. The build plate itself can be removed, as I just did. You just push down on it and take it out, both for maintenance purposes and for retrieving your parts. It's not as flexible as Method's plate, so I would really recommend using a spatula to remove your items once you're done printing. And what else? It also comes with a webcam, you know, to track the progress of your prints. And I would say it's a very robust, straightforward, but solid platform. If I compare it to the previous sort of generation, which would be the Rev Plus, this one has a smaller build plate, but I like quite a bit the heated element to it because it makes it much easier to print both multiple parts and to make sure that your parts are sticking properly to the build plate. So I'll just go ahead and get started with the process. As always, sorry. Wait. There we go. Sorry. Wrong click on the screen there. Wait, something's triggering here. There we go. Okay. So as always, if you have any questions, there's a right-hand chat for you guys to jump in. Alejandra's keeping track of the questions there. And I'll go ahead and get started. So when you first open your printer and set it up, you know, I would say anywhere a solid bench would be great. You know, I would keep it far from windows or AC vents that might create drafts or temperature changes. Unlike the Rev Plus, this printer is actually fully enclosed, right? It comes, you know, with a door. It's not hermetically sealed, and we don't control the temperature in the chamber, but it does offer quite a bit more protection against temperature changes than what you would get on a Replicator Plus, right? So first step after turning on your printer is going to be to load your material. So you just hit, and I'm going to switch over to my secondary camera over here. If you guys want to see anything in detail, also you can ask questions, you know, in the live chat. But here in my main panel, I'm bringing my camera a little bit closer so that you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and hit material, then load. That will start the heating up process. I'll go ahead and remove the lid here from the side. And you have both views, kind of like the wide angle view on the top left and the sort of in detail view on the top right, or actually the full screen view. And I'm going to go ahead and place my filament right in there, you know, just placing it in and into the spool holder. Open the material lid here, bringing you guys closer to the action. So just remove the material lid, which is just placed here, right? And the reason why I do that, you can do it without removing the lid, but it just gives you a clearer actual view of you know, the place where you're going to be pushing the filament through. So I'll just push a little bit, kind of like 3-4 inches of material in to get started. I'll go ahead and close that lid, and in just a second you will see how both the extruder hits the proper temperature and the spool starts to feed itself right into the extruder. So now I'm just going to go ahead and wait. We'll hit next so that the material, well, you know, taking me through the screens. Oh, sorry. Double click there. But here, you know, the material is actually going to be running through the extruder for a little bit. I would actually suggest waiting some, you know, a few seconds after the material starts extruding, just to make sure that everything is flowing fine. You know that the material is actually flowing smoothly. Let's see. Here we go. That's better. Okay. So you can see now the material actually coming out of the extruder. I'll just place the camera here, right? And I would give it a few seconds just to make sure that the material flows freely. You can see how smoothly the material flows. That's an important thing to note. If you see anything different, you know, any sort of dripping or drizzling or an uneven flow, that's a pretty good sign that there's something going on with your extruder or your material. Your material might have too much moisture in it. But after a few seconds, you can just hit next, confirm that the process is done. The extruder will now home itself. Basically, what that means is coming to the home position, and you're pretty much set to print now, right? I'll just go ahead and close the printer out, open the shut a little bit, bring back my lid here just to cover the material. Keep it a little bit more protected. Yep, where am I? Here we go. Closing the material, and that's pretty much it. Now the printer is ready to print, right? So next step is going to be to connect to my printer, and to do that, I am actually going to switch over here to here we go, to CloudPrint, right? And in MakerBot CloudPrint, I think it's the easiest way to actually manage these printers. You can both use the desktop versions, which is MakerBot Print, or the cloud version, which is CloudPrint, right? If you go to cloud.makerbot.com or cloudprint.makerbot.com, here we go, you'll be able to log in. You can do this and test it out even if you don't have the printer yet, right? So that's another interesting thing to do here. You can play with the tool before getting the printer yourself, and you'll see that I already have one printer set up there. That's my Method X, right? But what I'm doing right now is going to be adding this sketch printer to my CloudPrint environment. So I'll go ahead and hit here on the right hand side, add printer, sketch series, and then I'll go to, you know, it's going to basically guide me on how to add the printer. So I'll go to settings, network, MakerBot account, and it's going to ask for my username and password, you know, so that I can sign into the printer. I'll go ahead and hit and fill those up here. It'll take just a second. And in the meantime, I don't know if you guys have any specific questions about the sketch right now, do send them my way. I'll just finish up setting my printer here. Let me bring you guys back to the main view. Here we go. Let's see, I'll start going through some of the questions that I have so far here on the back end. Okay, let's see. So how long does it take to set up the sketch printer? Actually, you just, you know, sort of saw that happening in real time, right? It's basically about, once you take it out of the box, it probably takes not longer than 5-10 minutes. It's essentially loading the filament and then connecting to that printer. Here we go. All right. Sorry, it's taking a little bit longer for me to finish the, here we go. Okay, now I'm logged in. And let me go back to that view. I know that I'm sort of jumping back and forth, but I really wanted to show you guys this view, right? So now that the printer is logged in, this is my printer. I called it SketchBot. You know, not super interesting of a name, but yeah, it's essentially now there. And now I can actually monitor all of my print jobs that might be in the queue, the recent history. So I have quite a few print tests that I was sending out to the printer. And I can also go ahead and submit new, you know, new jobs to the printer. So I can go ahead and here, it's idle. I can select add a new print, right? That is going to allow me to basically come to the print slicer preview, select a new model. I'm just making sure that you guys are seeing this. Yep. So selecting a new file, and I'll go to my print tests, right? I have one quick jig that I've been printing especially for method, but you know, for now I think I can use it here. I'll change the printer that I want to use, so I'll hit on my SketchBot. You can see now that my print is actually being shown in my build plate. So this black area is my build plate, and then the gray part is actually the part that I want to print. I can select, you know, the support types, the print modes, the different material options. So as I said before, it's either PLA or tough. Right now I have blue PLA loaded. And once I'm ready to go, so I'm not going to change a lot on the settings here, just because I want to basically run my first print, right? I can hit Q. That will trigger the slicing process on the back end. So everything is done on the cloud when you're using CloudPrint, which is one of the great features of it. It's not consuming any resources locally in your computer. And yeah, essentially, you just let it run for a few seconds. It's going to take about 30, 45 seconds. It all depends on the geometry, right? The more complex your geometry, the more time it might take for it to slice. And in the meantime, I'll keep running through more of the questions. Let's see. For the tip, how long before we need to change a new tip? Okay, so I'm guessing you're referring to the extruder itself. These extruders really last a long time. I would say, you know, it's going to last for more than 6 months, a year, easily. It all depends on the usage that you give to it, right? The more you use it, the more that it'll wear. But I'd say, generally speaking, I wouldn't expect to change the extruder in the sketch anytime sooner than 6 months, you know, on any printer. What are the basic challenges a school might need to know when getting started with 3D printing? Well, I guess it's just understanding the system, right? I'm just checking back here, making sure that my part is slicing correctly. But yeah, you know, knowing essentially what the which printer to get. So if I go back to my wide angle view here, you know, there's many systems out there which you might be able to choose from, depending on your budget, depending on your school's requirements, right? From the Method X, which is our most advanced system, to the Sketch. And it all depends on what you're trying to do, meaning how many students are you going to be servicing, what grade those students are. It's different if you're trying to offer this to a robotics team or to an after school sort of a dedicated 3D printer, 3D printing class, versus, you know, a math class, something that's kind of like more quick and you know, skimming over the top of 3D printing, right? So I would ask those questions, like what's the purpose, what's the student group going to be like, and also what's the budget. I would say even though Sketch starts really, you know, considerably at a considerably lower price than Method, it's definitely not a limited platform. It's a single material, right? So you'll be able to only print with one material, and you don't have the soluble supports that you do on the Method platform. However, it is still a really powerful way of actually, you know, creating really interesting and complex parts, right? It's more about the application, I guess, in a sense. That's what I'm trying to get to. What are some advantages of a single extruder versus a dual extruder? Okay, well, a single extruder, it's much easier to maintain. It's also you'll be using less material naturally because it's not longer the mix of soluble supports and material itself. So you're just using one material, and the PLA material is considerably cheaper than any of the specialty or more advanced filaments that are present on the Method X. It's a more straightforward system, so if it's the first time that you're using 3D printing, I think it's also a great way to get started. And it can still yield really interesting results, right? Like this bearing, it seems a little bit of a complex assembly, but you can really stretch out the possibilities. Oh, actually, I have my gripper here. This gripper was entirely printed out on the sketch, right? All of the parts are printed out on the sketch, from the fingers to the actual main hand, let's call it that, to the main piston here that actually creates the mechanism. Everything was printed on the sketch. So really the limit is what the types of files that you are using and what you're actually trying to get out of the machine. The limitation, of course, is that for more complex parts, not having the access to soluble supports can make it a little bit trickier to print some of these geometries. How can you print different materials or colors with just a single extruder? You cannot, right? With a single extruder, well, okay. So this is a good example again, this assembly, right? Because I have the blue color here and the gray color on the tips. The way to achieve this is by doing assemblies. Instead of just printing a single part or all of the parts in a single go, you will be printing the gray parts in one build plate, switch the material out, and then printing the blue parts in a second build plate. So that's a way to actually combine colors, but you would not, technically you could, but I wouldn't recommend it. Switching material colors halfway through the print. It's possible, and I've seen people do it, but the thing with that is that it can definitely compromise, and it will, your parts, it will create, inefficiencies between the layers, specifically on the layer that you change the material. So I think if you want to have multiple color prints, it's better to do assemblies, so things that are going to be composed of multiple parts, and then have each of the parts be printed on a specific color. Do you need a raft with a heated build plate? It depends, right? So for example, this is another example that I have here, right? All of these parts are printed without a raft. It depends on what you're trying to print. I would say, generally speaking, the raft gives me a little bit more peace of mind, but with a heated build plate, it's definitely possible to print without a raft. How many models can you print on the build plate? It depends on the size of the model, right? As you can see here, I got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah, probably like 15 or 20 different models, but the nuts and bolts that I'm printing here are really small. These, fingers, which are actually, which are actually the fingers of my gripper assembly. They are rather thin, so I can nest a lot of them in a single build plate. It all depends on the size of the parts and the geometry of the parts. So you can have many more parts than just the one. How long does the heating process take? It's about 3 minutes. So once you're ready to start your print, and let's see how my slicing process is going. But once you're ready to start the print, it's actually going to be about 3 to 5 minutes for the whole heating process to be completed. Both, that includes heating the build plate and heating the extruder itself. What other materials can Sketch print with? So as I said before, it will be able to print with PLA and tough PLA. Those I think are great options to get started. So for your first couple of prints, I think it's going to be a really, really good sort of set of materials to print with, because essentially what you're doing is, when using PLA, you're printing the shape. It doesn't really matter, you don't care that much about the technical properties of the material. If you want something that's a little bit more robust, if you want something that's a little bit more, how should I say it, a little bit more engineering friendly, essentially what it means is that it has a longer resistance to wear, right? So if I'm having moving parts, if I'm having some sort of an assembly that will have gears, I would probably default to tough PLA when printing, and that will certainly help and enhance your prints. Let's see, how's this going? But yeah, generally speaking, I think if you're interested in learning about 3D printing, in the shapes of it, and even in some sort of basic assemblies, Sketch will have you covered. It's more, once you're ready to play with more advanced material, with more specific materials, that's when you will want to test out the waters with something a little bit more robust, like the method platform, right? So it's kind of like the back and forth that you'll need to do. It's, am I printing something that just requires like defined shapes, or do I really need to have my parts perform in a certain way, right? Will my parts be exposed to chemicals? Will my parts be exposed to certain forces? That's where you would actually say, well, let's go ahead and try the method platform. Okay, so it seems like, let's see, seems like my test here is ready to print. And as you can see here, so here I have the view of my 3 printers, right? I have Guild, I have XBot, which is my method X. So Guild is back in the office, it's not here. And in SketchBot, if you look here, I have a test jig that I just sliced. And I can just go, once it's sliced, it's going to appear in my queue. And once it's there, I can just go ahead and say, start new print, start print, and that will actually start the print. If I switch my view here, let me come to my secondary camera, right? You'll see the process of the print. I just want to get rid of that glare of the print getting started. So I'll open the door here just to get a little bit less glare. You know, the printer doesn't have a sensor on the door, so this is more on you to keep closed. And as I said before, there's really no chamber temperature control like what we have in Method. So don't expect any sort of meaningful changes to happen if you keep the door open or closed, but this is more to, you know, for safety reasons. You don't want the kids to be playing with the extruder, and also to keep a more controlled environment when printing. Even though this is not a heated chamber like what we have in the Method, it will still help in having a more sort of even printing temperature throughout the printing process. So you can see now, let's zoom here, and by zoom I quite literally mean moving my camera around. But you can see how my part is already heating up. It's going to give me the readings for both the extruder, that's the first reading, that's 129 over 220, and the build plate, which is already at 50 degrees Celsius, right? That's all there is, you know, for the both temperatures that will be needed on the sketch. And let's see, it's been about probably 1 minute since I sent the print, you know, from my queue. And in just a second, we should be seeing the extruder moving back into place. So once my extruder hits 220 degrees Celsius, which is just about to happen, the extruder will now home in and lower down into the build plate and start the printing process. So overall, you know, going back to that question that somebody had placed before, there we go. The build plate is going down to its home position. You can see the extruder slowly lowering itself, you know, getting ready to be printed. And that's it. You know, it's all it took for me to both load the material, answer a few questions, and of course get the first print started. It's about, you know, 10-15 minute stops process, and you know, the actual starting a print process will take no more than 5 minutes, right, for your first print. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, I'll leave the printer running here behind us, but as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll just make sure that there's not you know, any, can we use third-party materials on Sketch? Not at the moment. I mean, I would say you can. We haven't tested it out. We haven't validated it. I wouldn't recommend it. I think that, you know, the reason why we have our own materials is because we really like to make sure that they have specific quality controls, and that's important, I believe. So not at the moment. We don't have anything similar to the Labs extruder in the Sketch platform. I've seen people do it. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's mostly up to you. I think that it's, you know, the printer itself comes with 2 hefty spools of PLA that will probably get you for the first couple of months. I recommend sticking to the Method materials just because they are vetted, approved, and quality checked. So I cannot speak for other types of materials. And I think that with that, we've covered all of the questions now. So thank you so much. Let's see, yeah. Thank you so much, ever so much for watching. It's always great to see you guys here. And as always, if you have any more questions, reach us out at hello@MakerBot or Felipe@MakerBot.com. And both our social media platforms, Instagram and Twitter, @MakerBot. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good one.